The 2020 U.S. presidential election was one of the most contentious elections in American history, with allegations of voter fraud, irregularities, and election interference. In the aftermath of the election, a conspiracy theory emerged claiming that the U.S. government was involved in a cover-up to hide the truth about the election. In this video, we will explore the evidence and examine whether there is any truth to this conspiracy theory. The 2020 United States presidential election was one of the most controversial in the country's history. With a pandemic raging across the nation, millions of Americans opted to vote by mail, leading to an unprecedented number of mail-in ballots being cast. As a result, the election was marked by accusations of voter fraud and irregularities from various political figures and their supporters. One of the main allegations of voter fraud was the use of mail-in ballots. Some claimed that the mail-in voting system was open to abuse and that there was a significant risk of fraud. There were also claims that ballot harvesting was taking place, where individuals collect completed ballots from voters and then submit them on their behalf. Critics of mail-in voting argued that these practices could lead to ballot tampering, including the submission of fraudulent ballots. Another significant allegation was the use of voting machines. There were claims that the voting machines used in some states were susceptible to hacking and that this had led to significant vote manipulation. This allegation gained traction when it was revealed that some voting machines used software developed by a company called Dominion Voting Systems. It was alleged that this software had a backdoor that could be used to manipulate vote tallies in favor of one candidate or another. Additionally, there were allegations of irregularities in the vote counting process. Some claimed that the vote counting was not transparent enough and that there were significant discrepancies between the numbers reported by different counting centers. There were also allegations of poll workers intentionally changing the vote count or rejecting ballots in favor of one candidate or another. As the allegations of voter fraud and irregularities grew, so did the controversy surrounding the election. Political figures and their supporters on both sides of the aisle began to weigh in on the issue, with some calling for investigations and others dismissing the allegations as baseless. The controversy eventually led to a series of legal challenges, with various courts ruling on the legitimacy of the claims. The 2020 presidential election was marked by a number of claims of election interference, particularly from foreign countries such as China, Russia, and Iran. These claims focused on a number of different areas, including hacking attempts on election systems, disinformation campaigns on social media platforms, and attempts to influence the vote count. One of the most controversial claims of election interference was the allegation that the Chinese government had attempted to interfere in the election by influencing the vote count. This claim was largely based on reports of a red mirage on election night, in which early results showed President Trump with a commanding lead before gradually shifting in favor of Joe Biden. While this shift was ultimately attributed to the fact that Democratic voters were more likely to vote by mail, some still believe that it was the result of Chinese interference in the election. The claims of election interference were further fueled by the fact that the Trump administration and some of its supporters actively promoted these claims. President Trump himself repeatedly claimed that the election had been stolen from him and that there had been widespread fraud and irregularities. His supporters organized rallies and protests, some of which turned violent, in an effort to overturn the election results. As the allegations of voter fraud and irregularities gained momentum, a narrative began to emerge that the election was not just rigged, but that there was a coordinated effort to cover up the evidence of fraud. The cover-up conspiracy theory gained traction among supporters of former President Trump and his legal team, who claimed that the mainstream media and big tech companies were complicit in the cover-up. One of the main allegations of the cover-up conspiracy theory is that the mainstream media was biased against Trump and deliberately suppressed information that would have helped him win the election. The theory argues that the media ignored or downplayed evidence of voter fraud and irregularities and instead focused on discrediting Trump's claims. Supporters of the theory point to instances where news outlets retracted or corrected stories that were unfavorable to the Biden campaign as evidence of bias. Another aspect of the cover-up conspiracy theory involves big tech companies like Facebook and Twitter. Trump and his supporters claimed that these companies censored conservative voices and manipulated algorithms to promote anti-Trump content while suppressing pro-Trump content. This alleged censorship, they claimed, was part of a coordinated effort to ensure that Biden won the election. The cover-up conspiracy theory also alleges that the government and other institutions, including the Justice Department and the courts, were involved in the cover-up. Trump and his supporters claimed that judges were biased against them and refused to hear their cases, even though they had evidence of widespread fraud. They also claimed that the Justice Department and the FBI were actively working against them to cover up evidence of fraud and prevent them from overturning the election results, despite the lack of concrete evidence to support the cover-up conspiracy theory. It continues to be a popular narrative among Trump supporters and others who believe that the election was stolen from him. The theory has been amplified by conservative media outlets and has been used to justify a range of actions, including the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. In conclusion, while the 2020 U.S. presidential election was highly contentious and controversial, there is no evidence to support the cover-up conspiracy theory. Multiple independent sources have verified the integrity of the election, and there is no evidence of government involvement in a cover-up. While it is important to investigate and address any irregularities or evidence of interference in the election, it is also important to acknowledge the validity of the election results and move forward as a united country. Thank you for watching this video. We hope that we have shed some light on this conspiracy theory and provided a clear and concise summary of the evidence. Remember to always approach information with a critical eye and verify sources before accepting any claims as true.